You know that hollow feeling when you finish binge watching a series, scrolling through social media, or eating your favorite meal, and you feel nothing? There's something deeply wrong happening to our ability to feel joy, and I discovered why through the writings of a philosopher who went insane trying to understand this exact problem. Have you ever noticed how the things that used to bring you pure happiness, video games, movies, hanging out with friends, now feel like you're just going through the motions? You're not alone. In fact, you're experiencing something Friedrich Nietzsche predicted would happen to modern humans over 140 years ago. And here's the disturbing part. You've been programmed to seek joy in exactly the wrong way. This might be the most dangerous realization about modern life. We've created a society that promises happiness at every turn, yet delivers only emptiness. What I'm about to share has been buried in philosophical texts that most people will never read, hidden behind academic language that obscures a truth so powerful it drove its discoverer to madness. The real danger? Once you understand this, you can never go back to your old way of living. You'll see through every advertisement, every self-help book, every promise of easy happiness. In 1882, in the Italian coastal town of Rapallo, Friedrich Nietzsche sat alone in his room, wrestling with a realization that would transform how we understand human joy. He'd spent years observing the most successful, creative people of his era, and noticed they all shared one shocking trait. They weren't pursuing happiness at all. In fact, they often seemed miserable by conventional standards. Yet they possessed something far more powerful, a kind of joy that transcended pleasure itself. Let me tell you what this means for you right now. By the end of this video, you'll understand why everything you've been taught about finding happiness is backwards. You'll discover why the most joyful people often embrace the most difficulty. But here's what nobody tells you. This knowledge comes with a price. Once you see the mechanism I'm about to reveal, you'll have to choose between comfortable emptiness or meaningful struggle. In 1869, Friedrich Nietzsche was appointed as the youngest professor ever at the University of Basel. He was 24 years old, brilliant, and by all accounts, should have been happy. Instead, he was watching his colleagues and students chase pleasure and comfort while becoming increasingly miserable. One evening, while walking through the Swiss Alps, he witnessed something that changed everything. He came upon a group of wealthy tourists at a mountain resort, surrounded by every luxury imaginable. They were complaining about the weather, the food, their boredom. Despite having everything society said would make them happy, they radiated discontent. Further down the path, Nietzsche encountered a local stonemason, covered in dust and sweat, carving steps into the mountainside. The man was singing, not because his work was easy or pleasant, but because he was fully engaged in creating something lasting. The contrast struck Nietzsche like lightning. The tourists were seeking happiness directly, grasping for pleasure, trying to consume their way to joy. The craftsman wasn't thinking about happiness at all. He was focused on his work, on overcoming the resistance of solid rock, on leaving his mark on the mountain. And in that struggle, joy had found him. Nietzsche realized something profound in that moment. Joy accompanies. Joy does not move. You can't chase joy directly any more than you can grab smoke with your hands. The moment you reach for it, it dissipates. This observation would lead Nietzsche to a discovery about human nature that contradicted everything society taught. He found that humans don't actually want happiness. They want something else entirely, something he would later call the will to power. But I'll explain what that really means in a moment. Because it's not what you think. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This isn't another money doesn't buy happiness lecture. This goes much deeper. Nietzsche discovered that we've been lied to about the very nature of human desire. This same pattern Nietzsche observed in 1869 has accelerated beyond anything he could have imagined. We live in the most comfortable era in human history, yet rates of depression and anxiety are skyrocketing. We have more entertainment, more convenience, more pleasure at our fingertips than any generation before us. So why do we feel so empty? We've been programmed since childhood to believe that happiness is the ultimate goal. Every advertisement promises it. Every self-help book claims to deliver it. We're told to follow your bliss and do what makes you happy. From the moment we can understand language, we're taught that the purpose of life is to feel good, to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Society operates on a kind of agreement, an unspoken contract that says comfort equals happiness, that removing all friction from life will lead to joy. It's like we're all fish swimming in water we can't see, and that water is poisoned with a fundamental lie about human nature. We've built entire industries around this lie: the happiness industry, the comfort industry, the entertainment industry, all promising to deliver what they structurally cannot provide. Think of joy like light passing through a prism. You can't create light by staring at the prism. The light must come from somewhere else, and the prism merely reveals what was always there. Modern life keeps selling us fancier prisms, while the light source dims. We upgrade our TVs, our phones, our homes, expecting each improvement to finally deliver the joy we seek. But the emptiness only grows. But what if I told you that everything you know about finding joy is not just wrong, but precisely backwards? What if the very things you avoid, difficulty, resistance, even certain kinds of suffering, are actually the keys to the deepest joy possible? The first thing Nietzsche discovered was that directly pursuing pleasure is self-defeating. He called this the hedonic paradox. And once you understand it, you'll see why every attempt to find happiness has failed you. The mechanism is both simple and devastating. The very act of chasing joy ensures you'll never catch it. You see, joy is like a shadow cast by meaningful action. Just as you can't create a shadow without an object to cast it, you can't create joy without something meaningful to generate it. Think about a stamp collector Nietzsche described. They don't collect stamps because it makes them happy. They find stamps interesting, engaging, challenging to acquire and categorize. The happiness is a byproduct, a shadow cast by their engagement. This explains why manufactured fun feels so empty. When you go to a party specifically to have a good time, when you watch Netflix specifically to relax and be happy, when you buy something specifically to treat yourself, you're trying to create a shadow without an object. The shadow might appear briefly, but it has no substance, no staying power. The paradox deepens when you realize that the more desperately you grasp for happiness, the more certainly it eludes you. It's like trying to hold water in your fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it escapes. This is why people who dedicate their lives to being happy often end up the most miserable. They're professional shadow chasers, forever grasping at something that can only emerge indirectly. Nietzsche pointed to Michelangelo as a perfect example. When Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling, he suffered tremendously. His neck ached constantly from looking upward. Paint dripped in his eyes. He was often hungry and exhausted. By any hedonic measure, he should have been miserable. Yet his letters from this period reveal moments of profound joy, not despite the difficulty, but because of it. "I saw the divine emerging through my hands," Michelangelo wrote. He wasn't trying to be happy. He was trying to create something magnificent, to overcome the resistance of physical matter and human limitation. The joy that emerged was deeper than any pleasure seeker could imagine. Nietzsche observed this pattern repeatedly. Nikola Tesla, embracing celibacy and isolation to focus entirely on his inventions, working 18-hour days in his laboratory. Beethoven, continuing to compose after deafness struck, wrestling with musical notation he could no longer hear. Athletes pushing through pain barriers to achieve new records. None were pursuing happiness. All found a joy that transcended pleasure. This shows up in your life every day. Think about the last time you felt genuine, lasting joy. I'm willing to bet it wasn't from something easy or pleasurable. Maybe it was finally understanding a difficult concept after hours of study. Maybe it was completing a challenging project that pushed you to your limits. Maybe it was having a breakthrough in therapy after confronting painful truths. The joy came not from comfort, but from overcoming resistance. If you've ever felt empty after a vacation where you did nothing, or hollow after a weekend of pure entertainment, you've experienced the hedonic paradox firsthand. Your psyche knows the difference between pleasure and joy. One is cotton candy, sweet but dissolving. The other is a meal that actually nourishes. But understanding the hedonic paradox is just the beginning. The real question is, if we're not meant to pursue happiness directly, what should we pursue instead? Nietzsche's answer revolutionizes everything you think you know about human motivation. Most people will never grasp what I'm about to share because it contradicts everything our culture teaches about the good life. Now, you might be thinking, so I should just accept being miserable and find meaning in it? No, that's exactly the wrong interpretation. Nietzsche discovered something far more radical. Humans don't actually want happiness. They want meaning, and joy is what emerges when meaning is found. Here's where Nietzsche becomes truly dangerous to conventional thinking. He argued that your struggles, failures, and even your suffering aren't obstacles to joy. They're the raw material from which joy is forged. Think of it this way. A muscle only grows through resistance. Without weight to lift, it atrophies. Your capacity for joy operates the same way. This is the crack where the light enters. Every difficulty you face is an opportunity for what Nietzsche called an increase in power. Not power over others, but power as capacity. The ability to handle more, create more, become more. When you reframe your struggles as resistance training for your soul, everything changes. Consider this. Moses couldn't speak fluently, yet became the voice of his people. Demosthenes had a severe speech impediment and became Greece's greatest orator by practicing with pebbles in his mouth. They didn't overcome despite their limitations. Their limitations became the very thing that forged their greatness. The wound became the gift. But here's what's crucial. This only works when you're pursuing something meaningful. Meaningless suffering is just pain. Meaningful struggle is transformation. The difference? Choice, purpose, a reason that transcends your immediate comfort. Here's what happens when you shift from chasing happiness to pursuing meaning. First, you feel a kind of relief. The exhausting performance of trying to be happy all the time finally ends. You stop measuring every moment against some impossible standard of pleasure. The pressure to constantly feel good evaporates. Then comes disorientation. Without the North Star of happiness, you might feel lost. This is normal. You're detoxing from a lifetime of hedonic programming. Your psyche needs time to remember what actually moves you, what you actually care about beyond feeling good. Next, you'll notice something strange. Activities that used to bring empty pleasure become intolerable. Mindless scrolling feels like drowning. Binge watching feels like being buried alive. Your soul starts rejecting junk food experiences because it remembers what real nourishment tastes like. Finally, and this is when the transformation becomes real, you find yourself drawn to challenges you previously avoided. Learning becomes magnetic. Creation calls to you. You seek out difficult conversations, complex problems, skills that require patience to develop. And in these struggles, joy begins to bloom like flowers in a desert after rain. The danger is that once you taste meaning-derived joy, pleasure-seeking happiness feels like poison. You can't go back to the old way. This is why Nietzsche warned that his philosophy was dynamite. It destroys comfortable illusions. You'll find yourself increasingly alienated from a culture built on comfort and consumption. While others chase the next dopamine hit, you'll be seeking the next mountain to climb. While they medicate their existential anxiety with entertainment, you'll be transforming it into fuel for growth. Some people won't understand your transformation. They'll wonder why you're making life harder than it needs to be. They'll try to pull you back into the warm bath of comfortable mediocrity. This is the price of awakening to meaning. You can no longer pretend that happiness is enough. There are 4 distinct types of resistance that generate genuine joy when overcome. Nietzsche identified these through years of observation, and each one reveals a different facet of what he called the will to power. Understanding these isn't just intellectual exercise, it's a map to reclaiming your capacity for joy. Most people accidentally stumble into 1 or 2. Master all 4, and you unlock a level of fulfillment that transcends happiness entirely. Number 1. Physical resistance. This is the most obvious, but often most neglected. Your body craves challenge. Not punishment, but the kind of resistance that increases capacity. When you push through the burn of exercise, when you master a physical skill, When you overcome illness or limitation, you experience the most primal form of power increase. Nietzsche himself, despite chronic illness, took daily walks in harsh weather. He understood that comfort makes the body weak and the spirit weaker. Number 2. Creative resistance. Every act of creation is a battle against the void. The blank page, the empty canvas, the silence before music. These are forms of resistance, more challenging than any physical obstacle. When you create something from nothing, when you give form to the formless, you participate in the most divine aspect of human nature. Nietzsche wrote, "One must have chaos within oneself to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos is the resistance. The star is the joy." Number 3. Intellectual resistance. The mind, like the body, atrophies without challenge. When you grapple with difficult ideas, when you question your assumptions, when you think thoughts that disturb your comfort, this is intellectual resistance. Nietzsche spent his life wrestling with the most challenging questions of existence. His joy came not from finding easy answers, but from having the courage to ask difficult questions. Number 4. Social resistance. Perhaps the most difficult, standing against the crowd, thinking independently, living according to your own values rather than society's expectations. Nietzsche called this becoming who you are. It requires resisting the enormous pressure to conform, to seek approval, to trade authenticity for acceptance. The joy that comes from authentic self-expression, from living your truth regardless of opposition, is incomparable. When you understand all these forms of resistance together, a pattern emerges. Joy isn't random or mysterious. It follows laws as precise as physics. Increase your power through overcoming resistance, and joy appears as surely as heat appears from friction. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, "What is happiness? The feeling that power increases, that a resistance is overcome." He wasn't advocating for domination or cruelty. He was revealing the fundamental mechanism of human fulfillment. Remember the opening question, why nothing brings you joy anymore? Now you have your answer. Modern life has removed all meaningful resistance. Everything is optimized for comfort, convenience, ease. We've created a frictionless existence and wondered why we feel like we're sliding into emptiness. The soul needs resistance like the lungs need air. This isn't just about you as an individual. We're witnessing a civilizational crisis of meaning. Entire societies built on the promise of comfort and happiness are discovering that these goals, when achieved, create not paradise, but a particularly comfortable form of hell. Nietzsche predicted this with terrifying accuracy. He warned of the last man, a creature who has eliminated all discomfort, all risk, all struggle. The last man asks, what is love? What is creation? What is longing? And blinks in incomprehension. We're becoming a civilization of last men, medicating away every discomfort, optimizing away every friction, entertaining ourselves into numbness. The proliferation of anxiety and depression isn't a medical epidemic, it's a meaning epidemic. When you remove all resistance from life, you don't create happiness. You create a vacuum where joy should be. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it fills this one with anxiety, restlessness, and despair. Look around. Every institution is optimized for comfort. Education removes intellectual challenge. Work removes creative autonomy. Relationships are disposable when they become difficult. We've built a world that promises happiness and delivers only its hollow substitute. People will resist this truth because it threatens everything they've built their lives around. If joy comes from overcoming resistance, then our entire comfort-based civilization is pointed in the wrong direction. That's a terrifying realization. The psychological defenses against this truth are formidable. But I just want to be happy, they'll say, not realizing they're declaring allegiance to their own prison. Life is hard enough already. They'll protest, not seeing that meaningless hardship and meaningful challenge are entirely different things. It's not easy to see through conditioning this deep. From birth, we're taught that good feelings are good and bad feelings are bad. This simplistic binary thinking becomes a trap. It takes tremendous courage to question whether feeling good is actually good for you, whether comfort might be the most dangerous addiction of all. The resistance to Nietzsche's message isn't intellectual, it's existential. To accept it means admitting that much of your life has been pointed in the wrong direction. That's a form of ego death most people will do anything to avoid. When one person awakens to this truth about joy and meaning, something remarkable happens. They become a kind of beacon, silently giving others permission to question the happiness propaganda. Their very existence proves that another way is possible. This is how cultural transformation happens, not through mass movements, but through individuals who embody a different way of being. When you stop chasing happiness and start pursuing meaning, when you embrace productive struggle instead of avoiding all discomfort, you become living proof that the old paradigm is optional. The ripple effects are profound. Your relationships change because you stop expecting others to make you happy. Your work transforms because you seek challenge rather than ease. Your entire orientation to life shifts from consumption to creation, from comfort to growth. And here's the beautiful paradox. When enough people make this shift, we might create a society that actually produces joy rather than just promising happiness. Imagine institutions built on meaningful challenge rather than comfortable compliance. Imagine an education system that strengthens rather than coddles, a culture that celebrates overcoming rather than avoiding. So how do you work with this knowledge without becoming bitter or harsh? How do you embrace meaningful struggle without becoming a masochist? Here are 7 principles for integrating Nietzsche's wisdom. Step 1. Trust your perception of emptiness. When something feels hollow despite being pleasurable, that's your soul recognizing the absence of meaning. Don't gaslight yourself into pretending empty pleasure is enough. Your dissatisfaction is not pathology, it's wisdom. Step 2. Identify your authentic resistances. What challenges call to you? What struggles feel meaningful? Not what you think should matter, but what actually ignites something in you. Follow your genuine interests into their difficulties. Step 3. Start small with voluntary hardship. Cold showers, difficult books, learning new skills. These are training grounds for your will to power. Build your capacity gradually, like physical exercise for your soul. Step 4. Reframe existing struggles. Whatever difficulties you're currently facing, ask, how is this resistance increasing my power? What capacity is being developed? Transform involuntary suffering into voluntary growth. Step 5. Create before you consume. Prioritize output over input. Write before you read. Create before you watch. Produce before you consume. Creation involves more resistance than consumption, therefore more potential for joy. Step 6. Seek feedback, not approval. Approval seeking is happiness chasing in disguise. Feedback helps you grow. Approval just medicates insecurity. One builds power, the other depletes it. Step 7. Connect with others on the path. Find people who understand that struggle isn't the enemy of joy, but its mother. Build relationships based on mutual growth rather than mutual comfort. You stand at a crossroads that Nietzsche himself faced. One path leads back to the comfortable pursuit of happiness. Netflix, social media, the endless chase for good feelings. It's familiar, socially approved, and ultimately empty. You already know where this path leads because you've been walking it your whole life. The other path leads through meaningful struggle toward genuine joy. It's uncertain, sometimes difficult, often misunderstood by others. But it's the only path that leads to what your soul actually craves. The feeling of power increasing, of resistance being overcome, of becoming who you truly are. This isn't a choice between happiness and misery. It's a choice between thin pleasure and deep joy, between comfortable stagnation and meaningful growth, between being a last man and being fully alive. As Nietzsche discovered in that moment of clarity in Rapallo, the choice isn't really a choice at all. Once you see the mechanism, Once you understand why nothing brings you joy anymore, you can't unknow it. The only question is whether you'll have the courage to act on what you now know. When you integrate this understanding, not just intellectually, but lived, embodied, practiced daily, your entire experience of life transforms. Joy stops being something you chase and becomes something that emerges naturally from your engagement with meaningful challenges. You'll find yourself naturally drawn to activities that increase your capacities. Learning becomes addictive, but it's a healthy addiction. Creation becomes necessary, like breathing. You'll seek out difficulties that previously terrified you, knowing that on the other side lies growth. Your relationships will deepen because you'll stop expecting others to provide your happiness. Instead, you'll engage with them as fellow travelers on the path of becoming. Conflict becomes productive rather than threatening. Love becomes about mutual growth rather than mutual comfort. Most surprisingly, you'll find that embracing struggle actually leads to more joy than avoiding it ever could. The joy that emerges from overcoming resistance has a quality that pleasure can never match. It's earned. It's substantial. It has weight and permanence. It's the difference between a sugar high and actual nourishment. The journey isn't easy. Nietzsche himself struggled with illness, isolation, and eventually madness. But even in his darkest moments, he affirmed life, affirmed struggle, affirmed the whole painful, beautiful process of becoming. That's the ultimate test of his philosophy. It sustains even in extremity. Remember when I told you about that hollow feeling after binge-watching, scrolling, consuming? Now you understand what that emptiness is trying to tell you. It's not depression or dysfunction. It's your soul's compass pointing toward what you actually need. Meaningful resistance to overcome. That moment in Rapallo when Nietzsche recognized that joy accompanies but does not move, he was seeing through millennia of confusion about human nature. We're not pleasure-seeking machines. We're meaning-creating beings who generate joy through the sacred act of overcoming. The craftsman, Nietzsche observed, singing while covered in stone dust, understood something the wealthy tourists would never grasp. His struggle with the stone wasn't an obstacle to his happiness. It was the source of his joy. Each strike of his chisel increased his power, his capacity, his being. You now possess the same understanding. The question is what you'll do with it. You are not the same person who started watching this video. Something has shifted in how you understand yourself and your capacity for joy. You've seen through the great lie of our age, that comfort and happiness are the highest goods. You've joined a lineage of individuals throughout history who discovered this secret, that joy emerges from meaningful struggle, that power increases through overcoming resistance, that becoming who you are is worth any difficulty. This knowledge makes you dangerous to a culture built on consumption and comfort. You can no longer be pacified with entertainment or purchased with pleasure. You've awakened to what actually moves the human soul, and that awakening cannot be reversed. The question isn't whether you'll use this knowledge. You can't unknow what you now know. The question is how courageously you'll apply it. Will you take the small steps, building your power gradually? Or will you revolutionize your entire life, seeking the resistances that will transform you? Either way, you've begun. The very dissatisfaction that brought you to this video was the first stirring of your will to power, demanding more than empty pleasure. Trust that instinct. Follow it into difficulty, into growth, into becoming. What resistance will you choose to overcome today? What capacity will you develop? What will you create from the chaos within? The joy you seek is waiting on the other side of your next meaningful struggle. Go find it.